Hello and welcome to In the Light with me and Anna Isabel. And I have a wonderful guest with me today. Her name is Agi Heale, and she is here to talk about her brilliant new book, Generation Panic. Welcome, Agi.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me.
I've been reading your book, and what I really like about it is that it's very practical.
That's like music to my ears. So that's what I don't know, that just makes me feel so happy, because that was the complete intention of the book, that it was so accessible, easy to pick up, easy to kind of jump in and out of. And so yeah, I'm so thrilled that you found that you've enjoyed it.
It is. It's very practical because in my work as a therapist, there's so much in there that I do with my clients as part of a way of learning how to manage anxiety before we get to the bottom of what's causing it. So just in those beginning sessions, when we're still working through what the problem is, to have some tools that people could use to help them to just calm down is really important. So number one, breathe.
Yes. So breathing for me is completely foundational. It's at the heart of controlling anxiety and making sure that people don't feel so overwhelmed in the face of it. And I think for me in particular, when I'm feeling anxious or on the back foot, it's like right high up in my chest, and my breathing becomes very shallow and everything's very tight and constricted. And as soon as we learn to drop everything and take these deep, full belly breaths that really fill, and I like to think of our tummies almost like caves, that it's got all these nooks and crannies and dark places. And if we can take all that light, fresh, new air and be rid of that kind of dark, stale air, it really does work wonders. And it's not even just me, banging on about it. I mean, there's been tons of research about the power of breathing and how it really can inform the rest of our body that we're safe, that we're okay, and only then are we able to think clearly and then access all the resources that we already have. Whereas, we usually, when we're in a panic attack or feeling in like a very stressful situation, feeling very anxious, we can't think clearly, or I found like I couldn't think clearly. And so breathing just, I don't know, it just settles everything. It brings it back down to the ground.
Well, what happens is that we're in panic mode, and when we're in panic mode, it's like we can't breathe, and it's the heart racing wildly. And as you've pointed out in your book, very often people think they're having heart attacks because it's a very violent thing that the body experiences, is a full-blown panic attack. So I think what breathing does, and what lots of research has shown, quite aside from the experience of everybody who's done this, is breathing soothes the nervous system. So it calms everything down, taking those deep breaths. So that's tip number one. What's tip number two?
Oh, tip number two, where to start? I mean, the whole book is tips, but tip number two, I'm going to go with one that I really love is, I call it the energy flicker, because for me, when I feel anxious, things just become faster. It's almost like this current of electricity speeds everything up, and like this undercurrent runs through my body. I feel twitchy, I feel electric, and not in a good way electric, not in like a rock star electric way, but in a way that's kind of like something else is in control. And that's where, so the energy flick one is literally just like running your hands down your body and imagining that kind of current, that energy is just flicking right out of you. And it just, for me, it takes the edge off. It like takes that kind of unwanted, additional, extra anxiety and just gets rid of it. And I think, again, the kind of physiology and really kind of standing in your body with the breathing is transformational. I'd like urge anyone to try, even in a time when they're feeling really good or feeling really strong. You can still make yourself be even better. Just take the edge off. Yes, I love that one.
I think that's right. I think it's almost like there's an accumulation of energy in the body, and doing something that actually feels like you're releasing that energy. Some people go for a run, some people, dance, but it's just having to do something physical that helps to release that energy is also very, very useful. I like that you structure it too, so that there's an analytical component, so that what we're talking about here is dealing with it in the moment. But then beyond that, we need to understand what the source is of the anxiety. And I like the way that you encourage people to start noticing what the triggers are. Because I find that very often when a client comes to me, they don't even know what's caused the panic attack. They just feel that sense of being overwhelmed, and it's happening and it's getting worse. The intervals between panic attacks are getting shorter, or they're becoming more intense. And I ask them, okay, so what happened immediately before? And they can't tell me. And sometimes the trigger isn't obvious because it's not one thing. It's the suppression of something that's inside them, whether it's grief or anger or whatever it is. And it's not necessarily an external trigger. It's a thought that they hadn't registered that's come across their mind. And it might be just that they're a little bit worried about something they're doing and it tips them over the edge. So I found that that's a lovely thing that you were doing there. So tell us a little bit about that process of writing that you talked about.
Do you know, and just I'll go on to that in a sec, but I think that's a really important point, because I found that even with myself, is that I had really two things. One, I would be in a very normal situation, like not a hugely threatening one, but that would have quite a response in me. And so I was almost getting confused, like, this is just a phone call, or, this is just like a dinner with some of my best friends. And I couldn't quite understand why I was having such an outsized response to something that was so normal. Well, to me, it was normal. And the other thing is that at the time when I was really struggling, there was a lot going on. I had many different things. I was working incredibly hard. I'd risen to heady heights. And I was also I was engaged to be married. And so we were planning our wedding. And I thought the wedding was just what was too much for me to handle. I thought that was what was giving me the overwhelm. But after the wedding, I was like, great, like I'm gonna be awesome now. And I was like, I'm still not. Like, there was that kind of like you talked about, those layers, the suppression, that I hadn't acknowledged. And I think that was very interesting for me to learn about. But in terms of writing the book, sorry, I've given you a long-winded, I've gone off on a tangent, but in terms of writing the book, when I really struggled, I just wanted something that had all the information that I needed in one place, that I could dip in and out of as I needed it, like take the parts that actually really resonated with me or I thought would work, and like leave the parts that didn't. And I didn't have the capacity to take on like huge, reels of information. And so like super simple, digestible, bite-sized chunks was really important. And so, yeah, Generation Panic was really written for myself to make sure that I never felt as like horrendous as I felt, knowing that there's such easy things to do to feel good, to feel on the front foot.
And you specifically talk about, I like the little charts that you made. Tell us a little bit about those.
So there's a number of different charts or things, and they're really to help the reader run through it in just a kind of very measured and methodical way. And for me, when I felt anxious, it was just like I was just all over the shop, you know, like I was flying off the ceiling, and I wanted someone to essentially hold my hand and be like, okay, well, what actually happened? What physically happened in your body? What physically was running through your head? And actually, as you break it down, I think there's a quote like, you eat a cow one mouthful at a time or something. And it's the same kind of principle. When you break it down, it becomes less monstrous, less terrifying and overwhelming. And actually you realize there's such simple steps. There's, you know, it is one step at a time. It is one mouthful at a time. And so, yes, that was important that was kind of given to the reader, I guess, to help them.
Your book is actually full of little quotes that I loved.
Yes, I love a quote. I'm a complete sucker for them.
I wondered how much time you'd spent looking for quotes because they were so brilliant. It was really good.
In some ways, not that much time, because many of them were very familiar and obvious to me, and have kind of cropped up at different times. But I think what I hoped for, and maybe this was the part that took a little bit longer, was making sure that they really matched or were kind of in some ways related or linked to the chapter. But yeah, I love that. Yeah, I love that we've got that in there.
The other thing that I really liked was how you were talking about issues around self-esteem. Would you like to say a little bit about that?
In what sense? Just
what you learned in terms of valuing. So one of the things that I often talk about, for instance, is the need to celebrate achievements and little ones, because I think people often overlook the little things. And in fact, even when they hit the big things, by that point, they've dismissed them. And I really love that you had a chapter about that. That I thought.
Yes.
So do you want to say something about that?
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying. I completely agree. And I fell into that trap because I would set my sights on something and go and get it and be like, great, I'm now a director, I'm managing 3 teams. Okay, what next? You know, it was the next day back on the hamster wheel, little time to pause. And it was only these like big things that kind of in some ways felt worthy of celebration. And actually, particularly when I was feeling so anxious, I mean, even just going to the office was something to celebrate. It really was. Like, it was such a effort. It was so huge. And celebration in its entirety is just, it's such an important part. I don't think we ever give ourselves enough credit. We rarely slow down enough to really like acknowledge what we've done well and what it's taken to get there. You know, we forget the hardships often. We kind of glaze over them, but actually, if we really take the time to pause and be like, this was something that didn't feel so easy 6 months ago, or 6 hours ago, or 6 minutes ago, and actually I did parts, and this is what I've learned. Yeah, so important, and a huge part of when I'm coaching clients is really getting them to pause and not just rush on to the next mountaintop.
Sometimes there's a sense with people that, well, this is just what you do, and it's almost infantilizing or patronizing to say, well, no, actually, this is an achievement. And there's a real reluctance to do that. But I feel very strongly that this is a motivator. You motivate yourself by acknowledging the achievements. And it's a very fundamental principle of behavioral psychology that you motivate with reward. And so you have to recognize that you've done something good. It's a very fundamental thing. So I think that's one of the things I felt was brilliant, that it was there. The other thing that you talk about is, which I think is really, really hard for people, is the importance of the choices that we make about who we spend time with.
Yes. So there's a couple of chapters that kind of touch on this in different ways, you know, like your support network and making sure that you have a safe person, like different people in your life who can support you. But there's also a chapter called Radiators and Drainers. And this is the term that I mean, we all have radiators in our life. We have those people that we meet who make us feel good and they boost us up, and we leave feeling like we're radiated on. You know, there's that energy, there's that light. And that's not to say that it's like a Pollyanna and it's always positive and everything's just sunny and happy days, but in that relationship you feel supported and like it's really good, it's a positive thing for you. And then we also have people in our lives, and I'm sure you have them and I continue to have them in some respects, the drainers, the ones that actually it's not positive for you to be friends with, and it can suck out your energy. And this can be, you know, in different parts of your life, whether that's personal, professional, and really taking a step back. And if you can try and take your emotion out of it and almost imagine you're like in a bird's eye view, able to look down on it, like, is this actually really working for you? And if it's not, then how can you change that? Because we all have choices. We decide who we spend our time with. And again, there's a great theory or quote that if you show me your 5 best friends or who you spend time with, I'll show you your future. And that's kind of the same principle. Like the people that you surround yourself with, if they're great and they're lifting you to greater heights and they're, you know, supporting you and think the best of you and can see all your potential and like everything that you can offer, like, oh my God, why would you not want to be around those people? Like, you know, why would you possibly want to be with people who make you doubt yourself or get into bed that night and think, oh shit, what did I say? Or, oh, have I made an idiot of myself? You know, those are not people that are going to really like take you to where you should go. So yes, it's another topic that I feel strongly about, and it's hard. It's a difficult topic, and you might have to really think about, you know, people that you've historically had relationships with in any capacity and whether that's still working for you.
It's a very difficult one, because what we're not saying is that when your friends are going through a hard time, you say goodbye. That's not what we're saying, because there are going to be times when somebody is not going to be much fun to be hanging around with because they're going through a difficult time. And yes, you absolutely do want to support them, and that is a good thing. But what we're talking about is people whose attitude overall is so negative that it's difficult to be with them. And perhaps they're hypercritical of everyone around them, including you. So then that drains you, because what it does is it reinforces any insecurities that you might have about yourself. And that's what we're talking about.
Yes, and I love how you've really clarified that, because I can think of, you know, even recently spending time with friends who are wonderful friends and radiators going through really challenging times. And it's not all easy conversations, but I don't leave those conversations doubting myself or feeling like my energy is really drained. It might be more like, oh, that's, you know, this is life, this is hard, or this is, you know, but I'm with them. It's just so different. And I think if you're really honest with yourself, you can check it. It's so clear internally whether the energy is like working for you or against you.
most definitely. It is about an overall attitude. Is it positive? Is it negative? And then there are other factors to consider, like resentment and jealousies, etc. And I think then it is good to detach, even if gradually detach. And that's very important. I guess one of the best examples of that is when people are having difficulty with addiction and they want to pull out of addiction. And it's more difficult because the people around them are also addicts and don't want to lose them in some way. So you could see this in different contexts. That's perhaps the most clear one, but it operates in very subtle ways as well, for all of us. So tell us about the safe person.
So for me, when I was really struggling, my safe person was my fiance and now husband. We made it through. We still went on and got married. But during that time, particularly when I was full blown in the midst of a panic attack and kind of my rational thought had run for the hills, I really needed one person that I could call that I wasn't embarrassed in front of. And just, I remember calling him the first time being like, I have no idea what's happening to me. Like, I'm so scared. I don't understand this. And he was just able to calm me down. And particularly with time, as we kind of both kind of increased our knowledge as to what was happening, we then also had like better tools to be able to kind of come back from that place. But I think for me, the biggest part of a safe person is just someone who really knows you and can see all the best in you and holds you to that, reminds you of that. Because when I was struggling, I felt like I had really lost all of that. Like I wasn't, like, all of my foundations felt really rocked. And so when I was on such unstable ground, it was so important and like relief that I had someone who knew what ground I could and would be able to stand on again. I think I've explained that quite poorly, but yes, having a safe person.
Yeah, I think it's about having someone that you could turn to who can actually talk you down and help you to find the ground again. I think that's, very, very important. And you might have more than one. So, that would be a good thing. But it's a very important part of not feeling alone as well, to have someone that you can turn to just in that moment when things are at its height. So the other thing you talk about, which I think is also very important, is slowing down. So tell us about your version of slowing down. What does that mean?
Good question. So this is something that I've struggled with in the past and continue to work on, is maybe a good way to put it, is that I think in my personality, I quite like things going fast. Like, things are, I get energy from that. I mean, as you can probably tell from this conversation, I talk quickly, I can get quite energized and animated, and that gives me energy. However, what I need to be very aware of is that can be quite renewing as long as it stays in a positive context. It's on a like an excited side. But as soon as that becomes depleting, it actually flips over into anxiety. It's like that energy has become so fast, almost like the current I was talking about earlier. And one way that I describe it is this balance between the being and the doing. And I'm naturally quite a good doer, and a lot of people, a lot of my clients, a lot of my friends, we're naturally good doers, but we're human beings. And so if you imagine like you've got wings on a bird, if you're just always doing, you're just flying in circles. And that's where I got to. I was flying in circles. I wasn't pausing, I wasn't slowing down. And so being able to understand that the being side was also important and what that meant to me has been like a huge journey, like incredibly soul searching, interesting, hard conversations. But I mean, there's a whole host of things that make me slow down. Like, I love painting my nails. I love doing Lego. I like going for walks. I like staring at a wall. I like listening to good music, you know, just normal things, but different. Like, I need to consciously remember to call upon these things and take that time to slow down and, I don't know, do a dot to dot painting or whatever, whatever it might be.
Of course, and that's very valuable, because what we're doing is we're allowing the brain to actually not be subjected to fast stimulus all the time, which is exhausting. And when that happens, because very often we're in very much that left brain space, what happens is that we're allowing the right brain to work. So just going out for a walk and the being in natural surroundings, the level of stimulation reduces. So it allows then the right brain to process everything that's been happening. And perhaps there are connections to be made then at that point between the two sides of the brain. And inspiration comes in, and it allows for creativity to come in just by pausing. And pausing doesn't mean necessarily doing nothing. In fact, there is room for that in life. There needs to be room for that in life. But just going for a walk in a natural space is helpful. And just being able to, I like the idea of dot to dot paintings. You know, that's exactly the type of activity that allows for these two parts of the brain to connect, and something good happens when we do that. So that's really very valuable. And it's also about being in the moment too. I think one of the things that gets people into this space of overdoing, leading to anxiety, is that, you know, it's almost like being on a tightrope, juggling too many plates. And you just know one of those is going to drop, or you're going to fall off that tightrope. Something's going to give. And so, yeah, you need to perhaps not juggle so many plates, or take a break because you're getting tired from that level of concentration. So one of the things that does that is just being in the moment, focusing on one thing at a time, making sure that your brain's engaged with whatever it is that you're doing, because that slows it down, because you're not thinking of 100 things at the same time. You're thinking about one thing at a time. And so that's really helpful. And I like that you talk about that as well.
Yes, I do. And finding your flow is such an important component of that, because I think for anxiety, quite simply, it's a worry about the future. And so it's this kind of spiraling anxiety about something in the future. Whereas actually, if we really slow down and just take each moment as it comes, much easier said than done. But there's huge value in that. And, you know, it's interesting what you were talking about earlier is there's been so much really interesting research on states and baseline states. And I found that fascinating, because I think I was operating at such a high frequency, or like higher level of just doing, that every time I stopped, I was like, oh, I don't know, what's wrong? I better get back to that. You know, it wasn't my natural place, but that was just leading me to be exhausted and anxious. And so, like, I always explain it, if you imagine like an air conditioning unit, if you set it to 23 degrees, it will do everything it possibly can to maintain that. And so all we need to do is just drop the temperature to the baseline that's actually going to work for you, and being present. It's all updating your mind that you can be at a different level, and that's important. But yeah, it's all an education, isn't it? It's just updating your brain that like it's okay and you're all right.
And of course, one of the things that you also talk about is the amount of time that we spend online, and particularly on social media, and what that does. And so it'd be good to hear what you have to say about that.
Oh, this is a hard topic and something that I continue to struggle with. Social media, well, it's so interesting. It's a double-edged sword, isn't it? There's so many positives to social media. It's a spread of real positivity and fast messaging, and in a real positive way, like when something important needs to get out there, and it can drum up momentum. It can help promote businesses. I'm sure after this podcast we'll both be promoting on social media, and that helps spread that word. However, there's a side to it that is also not positive. It's like that radiator drainer kind of concept almost coming into social media. And what's difficult, and so the other weekend I was like, I'm just going to leave my phone. I don't want to look at it all weekend. And then I realized, moving around, I'm based in Singapore, like I need it to be able to contact trace going into buildings. I physically have to have it to be able to get in and out. And so I'm always glued to it. I've always got it there. I've always got like one eye on it. And I just don't think that's very good for me, but I'm still trying to work out the right solution and how to get around it and create the right boundaries to make sure that it's not all consuming, which is hard. It's hard. It's kind of everywhere, or it feels like it's everywhere.
It is. I think one of the ways in which I've done this is I'll take from whatever I'm doing that. And I'm not going to be checking my phone whilst I'm doing it. I have time allocated for that. And then that's it. It's not once a day, it's a few times a day, but it's not going to be interrupting what I'm doing, because otherwise I think I'd I don't know what I do. I think my brain would just explode. I wouldn't be able to do all of that. So that's how I found my way around it, because clearly I do need to be replying to people, and sometimes it's very important. And when it rings, I always do something with it. If I can't take the call immediately, I'll get back to people, but I always do check. So it's always very valuable to do that, but not allowing it to dominate, so that then I think that's the way forward. And I like the way you highlight that as well.
Yeah, and I think I've definitely slipped into that when I've unconsciously done something on my phone, whether that's just like to go in and check a WhatsApp, or I've unconsciously found myself scrolling through Instagram, and like time goes past. It's not like a 20-second check-in. And first of all, I mean, having the awareness that I'm doing that is key, but then also understanding like, how do I best operate, or how can I make sure that I put the right boundaries in place? So exactly as you say, like I try, and if I'm trying to be in a task, I'll turn my phone off, I'll put it in another room, like I'll take away that distraction. Yeah, I mean, I've tried all sorts, but it's hard. Like my phone is in some ways like my lifeline. My alarm is on it in the morning, so the first thing that I pick up is my phone. I don't know. I've tried to buy alarm clocks. Any of your listeners have got good tips, share them with me. I'm happy to hear it all.
I think the thing is that I have yet to find an alarm clock that wakes me in a way that I enjoy.
Yes, and like I think it just almost feeds my anxiety. I'm like, oh my gosh, have I even turned it on right? Or like, is it going to go off or not? Whereas on my phone, I can set 2 alarms. I don't know. Maybe that's.
I can wake to bird song on my phone, and
yeah.
and that's nice. I like that. So it's definitely very useful. And thank you so much for your wonderful book. The book we've been talking about is Generation Panic, and in the description box, you will find a link to it. Now, if people wanted to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
Yes, please do. My name's Agi Heale, Agiheale, and there's not many of me. So have a Google. You can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram. Obviously, I'm never going to be on there because I'm so good with my phone. But just in case I was, you can connect with me there. And got the website generationpanic.com. So yeah, would love to hear from you. Please do get in touch.
And so that information will also be in the description box. And I want to say thank you so much for speaking to us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you all for watching In the Light. And next week, we're going to be talking about where our soul goes after we pass on. So that's a very beautiful conversation to look forward to. And I want to say thank you for watching today. And do please subscribe. And if you're enjoying the interview, make sure you share it. And until next time, goodbye.